What's the reason for it? I know who to blame for this. It's the damn kids. It's the millennials. These are the folks that we can point the finger to. And it's probably best to understand why by, of course, it's as seen on TV. And keep in mind that television, that Hollywood does more consumer research than any industry. And television shows are really a reflection of what we aspire to based upon that consumer research. So with the baby boomers, there's lots of shows that you could pick, but I Love Lucy because this episode was the third week in January of 1957. This is when Lucy got it in her head that she wanted to leave Manhattan and go out to suburban Connecticut. And the ideas were that it's great for her child, you've heard this before, fresh air, that Jeffersonian ideal of getting back to the farm.
Clean, fresh air, homegrown food.
Lucy, you're not thinking of moving, are you?
Why not? It'd be great for little Ricky. And Grace took us to see the most wonderful house that's for sale. A quaint old early American.
So in this clip, she's having remorse about leaving her home in Midtown Manhattan, looking out over the back lot of Universal Studios.
Here we are. No more tears, honey?
Oh, no, I'm fine now that we're here. Gee, isn't this exciting? We're in our very own home. The first house we ever had.
Now, their problem is that the next episode, Fred and Ethel were invited out. They're friends from the old apartment building. And 2 episodes later, they moved out. And they kept on telling their friends about how great it was out there, and they kept on moving out until the roads all got jammed, and you know what happens next. They have to move further out. And basically, one thing we learned from the last 50 years is that as you do more drivable suburban development, the quality of life declines. You add more cars, you get rid of the open space, and there's more pollution, the very thing that are the promises of suburbs. Hence the reason that we have seen the rise of neighborhood groups in this country. That when most of us gray hairs were growing up, there were no neighborhood groups. But today, basically every neighborhood is now organized, and they're organized to stop real estate developers from building drivable suburban. It's a principle that I refer to as more is less. Well, now fast forward to see what some of the shows that our kids were raised on. Of course, Seinfeld is one of many. Sex and the City, Friends, all the rest. And here we have single friends strolling safely down a lively urban street, and the key demographic change is delayed marriage and delayed child rearing, which is what, of course, Jerry Seinfeld sort of personified.
They do the interview on Jeopardy now?
Yeah, it used to be right in the middle of Single Jeopardy. Now they do it right after Single Jeopardy.
Yeah, it's much better, isn't it?
Oh, no comparison.
The only show about nothing. But it showed a different image of walkable urban and downtown living. Much different than what the baby boomers were raised with Hill Street blues and that cities are dangerous and that you're going to get murdered. But instead it's the safe, exciting place to stroll with friends. So besides the millennials, a lot of other reasons. The baby boomers, even though you millennials want us to get off this stage, we ain't going. We're never going. But the baby boomers do play a secondary role as we begin to retire. It's typical that retirees downsize, and many of them are going to pick walkable urban places. But the basic thing is demographics. That when I was growing up, 50% of all households had children living in them. 50% were singles or couples. Today, 25% of all households have children in them. 75% are singles and couples. Now, singles and couples are the target market for Walkable Urban, which is not to say that families aren't welcome. I live near Georgetown, which is experiencing a baby boom, and every time I go into Georgetown, there is somebody with one of these double Cadillac strollers that push you off the sidewalk. But you're seeing that same sort of baby boom taking place in many, many walkable urban neighborhoods. But the big issue is about the future. When you look at the demographic projections for the next 20 years, looking at just the growth in the next 20 years, that marginal increase, only 14% of new households will have children in them. Of the new households created, 86% will not. The market's telling us something. The other thing is just sheer boredom. That for most people moving to Mobile today, you have an option of a single-family house or a single-family house. It's your choice. You don't have a choice. And the market doesn't want lack of choice. The creative class, we have a lot of research that shows that the creative class, that group of folks that are driving the knowledge economy, is demanding walkable urban places. But then finally, there is just simply the expense of maintaining a fleet of cars. That this chart that in the middle shows that the average American household spends 19% of their total household income on transportation, the vast majority of it for cars. If you take a look on the right, the drivable suburban households spend 25% of their household income on transportation. That means that there are members of the household that are driving to work to make a paycheck to afford to pay for the car so they can drive to work. This is not a way to build great household wealth. But now look at the slide on the left. Walkable urban households only spend 9% of their total household spending on transportation, i.e. cars. It's not to say the car goes away, it's just that you don't have to take every trip from your house by car. And that 16% delta is worth about $700–800 billion per year of increased spending. That could go into your house, it could go into your education, it could go into that most un-American of all activities, you might even save it. The other thing is, of course, is that when you drop one car out of your household, you're going to increase your mortgage capacity, according to AAA numbers, by at least $100,000. In fact, if it's a typical Camry that you drive for 15,000 miles, you drop that car out of your household, you can invest another $150,000 into your mortgage. That's a chunk of change. When you do the consumer research on this, as my colleague Dr. Jonathan Levine did at the University of Michigan, he took a look at walkable urban places, and oops, I see that there's a label missing. On the left are the demand for walkable urbanism in both Atlanta and Boston. Atlanta's red, Boston's blue. And what it came in at was that roughly 30–40% of families wanted a walkable urban place to live. In the middle is drivable suburban. And again, about 30–40% want to live in drivable suburban. Perfectly valid market thing to do. And about 30% on the right are sort of agnostic. They could go either way. So this is your classic American 50–50 split down the middle. But when you take a look at the supply of walkable urban, if you here in Mobile have more than 5% of your housing that's in a walkable urban condition, I'd be surprised. That implies that there's huge pent-up demand. And what we're seeing in places throughout the country that have great walkable urban places is tremendous price premiums. And that to me is the real bottom line of this thing, is are people willing to pay a lot more money for a walkable urban place over the same size drivable suburban? And what we're seeing now is price premiums of between 40 and 200%, 40% more to 3 times more for a walkable urban place over a comparable drivable suburban house.